Where do speakers usually stand? Is it over there? Or here? Whatever. Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Awa. I'm one of the co-founders of Anoma and Namada. First, a little bit about myself. In the past, I actually worked in surveillance capitalism in a company called Chainalysis. That was actually my first job in the space. You might not know a lot about Chainalysis, but Chainalysis certainly knows a lot about you. And now I work on goods for the public, including Anoma and Namada and a bunch of other protocols. So I always want to start a little bit about privacy because I think we always think about privacy for individuals, but I think not that many people actually think about privacy for nation states. And actually very strong arguments for why governments and sovereign nation states should start worrying about privacy-preserving technologies. It starts with the fact that our existing financial systems and most backbones that are essential for security of every country is at the moment by default transparent. And that also includes the decentralized systems, as all blockchains, all cryptocurrency protocols are at best pseudonymous. And we all know that that is just not private. So why privacy for nation states? Actually, the first reason is that it is essential for national defense, as in financial systems are critical for security, for the security of nation states. And at the moment, there is just no way that it is safe or secure enough to move the existing financial system to the blockchain. So in order to because what we're doing right now is making it extremely easy, not for only other nation states, but any agent out there that is able to download the data and perform any kind of statistical analysis on the data to basically anonymize and figure out what is any other government doing with all the financial data. The other reason is that we actually need privacy to safeguard democracy. This is a little bit unintuitive. It is the fact that most systems and applications on Web 2 are also transparent by default. And this data can actually be used by other governments to attack your government. Think of, for example, all the data that we are leaking through Facebook that can later on be leveraged by governments like Russia, North Korea, whatever it is. Nowadays, there's no need really to wage physical warfare. You can actually wage way more damaging war by using information that is all transparent in social media. Think of, for example, a really good attack to increase the chances of stochastic terrorism in a nation would be not to try to start war, physically speaking, but to say, let's find out through those Facebook groups which ones are those more, think of, for example, Facebook groups where there are veterans of the United States, let's say. And veterans are operationally really capable. They might actually, and you might be able to find out which groups are like slightly more easy to be radicalized. And to those people, you can actually target a lot of information around like, look, this is what happened during war. Are you upset about this? And this, it doesn't really matter if it's not successful with a specific group. But if you do this at scale with many groups, you can slowly increase chances of one of them actually flipping and then doing something pretty radical on the ground. So I would say, argue that for nation states, that is actually very important for democratic governments like the United States, like Europe, to actually start adopting privacy-preserving technologies. So privacy for individuals and communities, I think this is a little bit more obvious, as in we need some kind of system that defends individuals and communities against surveillance capitalism. This is, in the end, there are private corporations out there that just want to make a dollar. They just have a profit motive. But for as long as there's data, it creates opportunity for them to actually monetize and exploit it, which leads to the next point, which is people actually just want to use the services. Like when you pay for coffee or something like that, you went there to pay for coffee. But what happens with existing financial systems is that there's a lot more, many other externalities happen under the hood, which is you pay for coffee, but there's also a lot of data that is collected by all those financial intermediaries, which later on can be used for exploiting and extracting value from the users. And it doesn't make sense because you just want to pay for coffee, you just want to consume the coffee. But in the end, there's a lot of other externalities that happen from the fact that data was collected and aggregated by intermediaries in the process. And in the end, I kind of want us to remind ourselves that we are all in this space because of the purpose of building systems that can actually be viable alternatives and better alternatives to existing systems, including the ones of Web 2. And in order to do that, we need to enable ones that minimize the externalities for the users in order to enable a more equitable relationship between the user and the people and the system. Quick look at the evolution of privacy and decentralized protocols. So unscriptable settlement architectures, those are cryptocurrencies primarily. Usually, with Bitcoin and the long tail forks of Bitcoin, the privacy guarantees were limited to pseudonymity. And then with the passage of time, we start to see other propositions like Monero that uses ring signatures, Moa coin also uses ring signatures, or Zcash that uses ZK snarks. But something that brings them in common is that privacy is usually attached to the monetary policy and the means of exchange, which means that if you wanted to pay privately, you also had to adopt that monetary policy or that currency. And that is something common about all the privacy-preserving protocols that happened ever since Bitcoin. And now we start to see unprogrammable settlement protocols like layer 1s like Ethereum, layer 2s like, I'm assuming, Optimism, Arbitrum, and a bunch of other layer 2s. I've started to see dApps deployed to them. So we see Tornado Cash, ZK Money, they are dApp-specific privacy that are deployed in transparent layer 1s. So here we see that we start to decouple a little bit the privacy from the assets and the platforms. And I would like to challenge a little bit the design principles. It's like, let's forget about blockchain, let's forget about cryptocurrencies, and let's kind of say, if we wanted to bring privacy-preserving technologies, what are the 2 principles we should build on top of? And the first one is, I would say very obvious, but not obvious to so many. It starts with decoupling privacy from the assets, but also from the platforms. Again, people want privacy, but not necessarily your monetary policy. I think not everyone wants to price the milk in Bitcoin, or not everyone wants to price the Bitcoin in ZEC, necessarily. And again, protocols should not be dogmatic about what is the means of exchange. Like, actually, people should decide what to use as means of exchange, and nobody should enforce anything or be dogmatic about it, not a protocol or the dApp. So that's the first principle I'd like to challenge. The second one is that so far we have been thinking about privacy as a feature, as an add-on, as like, this is a button, we can make it blue or red. But a framework that we'd like to start establishing is that I think it's more correct to think of privacy as a public good. And public goods in economics have actually usually two properties. They are non-excludable, meaning that nobody is able to deprive access to it, access from it. And nobody means not other individuals, not companies, not governments. So they have to be at all times accessible by anyone. And they have to be, they're actually non-reverse and anti-reverse, which is something really unique, really specific to privacy sets and privacy. If you think about anonymity sets, what makes them anti-reverse is the fact that actually the more people use it, the more benefit everyone else gets out of it. And yeah, I would say if we start thinking about privacy as a public good, we will probably have the right framework and the right design choices and criteria to design privacy-preserving technologies. And this is what led us to design Namada. Namada is privacy as a public good. Concretely, it is a layer 1 protocol for asset-agnostic interchain privacy. It provides Zcash-like shielded transfers to deploy ZK snarks. It we reach a point where we can actually start generating proofs on browser, also edge devices, so on browser, on mobile. This is for any assets, again, decoupling the assets from the privacy from the platform, from the protocol. So it supports this kind of shielded transfers for any kind of assets. At the moment, in the short term, it's going to support fast finality chains, Ethereum, etc. And It deploys some cool cryptography that allows all assets to share one common anonymity set. So think about, for example, NFTs and fungible assets from Ethereum, including the native asset of Namada. They will all share one anonymity set, which is a really desirable property to have. For example, think of an NFT that is very low volume but is very high value. Then it really benefits from, it looks basically indistinguishable from a transfer from just a base. Let's say an ETH transfer or a transfer of the native asset. A few second latency and near zero fees, and it deploys a bunch of interesting mechanisms to fund privacy as a public good. We'll talk a little bit about it later. Namada is Anoma's first fractal instance. What is Anoma? There's going to be a talk tomorrow about it, so check it out. Here's an architecture overview. I won't go through the details, just for you to look into some of the most interesting pieces here and there. Namada is a layer 1. So at the middle, we have the kind of like the base of the ledger and the protocol. So at the bottom, peer-to-peer, ledger, consensus execution governance, it actually uses Tendermint core. And on top of it, we just validate the predicates, which is designed for smart contracts. This is actually not so important for Namada, but it will be important for Anoma. And so a few interesting components that are actually deployed and implemented as validated predicates are the MSP and convert circuit, which is the thing that provides the one anonymity set. The proof of stake part, the public goods funding mechanisms, a bunch of governance features. The way it connects to other chains, so you can actually get privacy for assets that were generated in other chains, which is a very important point for Namada. Namada is not about you create the assets on this chain. It is more about the assets were created in other chains, and you want to retrofit privacy somehow. So the way it connects to fast finality BFT chains, think of Cosmos, Osmosis, whatever chain that uses the Cosmos SDK or has a notion of fast finality. We connect through it by IBC connectors. And in the cases of chains that have not yet the notion of fast finality, we have built some custom bridges. The first one that we built is a custom bridge to Ethereum. And we decided to build it ourselves because out of all the other architectures out there, we wanted one that prioritized the highest assurance and security for the user. And actually, this design just has that parameter in mind, just maximize that parameter. We also have submitted a proposal to build a custom bridge to Zcash. That is in the Zcash governance forum. You can check it out. And there might be other chains that we might be looking into that might also need a similar but adapted bridge design. And we're building Namada in a fully vertically integrated way. So we kind of feel like we hear the tagline of UX is very important, which is true. And I think like part of the reason why shielded transfers hasn't been adopted is due to the UX. So the way we are going to be launching Namada is that there's going to be an end user interface that is browser-based, like the very first versions. And you will be able to do directly shielded transfers for any assets just using the browser application. So there's a few other things that are kind of very interesting to look into. We already spoken about the MASP and convert circuit. So the MASP provides one anonymity set for every asset. It is actually an upgrade to the Zcash sapling circuit. And it comes with a second upgrade, which is the convert circuit. That allows us to create shielded set rewards, as in a way to reward people for using shielded transfers over transparent transfers, because Namada actually supports both, and it's up to the user which one they want to use. But we are actually able to provide carrots for people who use the anonymity set, who do contribute to the anonymity set. The proof of stake mechanism comes with a couple of innovations. It comes with a variant of the F1 fee distribution mechanism that allows you to, basically you do not need to span the network to delegate, undelegate, and things like that. It all happens automatically, especially the compounding effect. It also comes with cubic slashing for the ones who are more used to operating validators. Cubic slashing is just a way to discourage, in the case of validators operating multiple nodes with different accounts, is a way to discourage validators to operate them in the very similar configurations. Just try to kind of have this infrastructure diversity and in setups. Then we have, with PGF mechanisms, proactive and retroactive PGF mechanisms, we can go a little bit more into later. And the way governance works with, there is actually a treasury dedicated to funding public goods. It deploys a form of like kind of limited liquid democracy where we are splitting away from historically governance and staking has been kind of attached as roles. You're delegating to a validator, implicitly you're also delegating the governance decisions to the validator. But on Namada, we're actually splitting those roles where you can delegate on one hand for staking and for security to validators, but then you can also delegate to another third party that's nothing to do with staking to make decisions on the funding for public goods. Okay, so funding privacy is a public good. Conceptually, the way this works is the Namada protocol generates crates of carrots, and those carrots get distributed into 3 buckets. The most interesting buckets are in the case of the anonymity set, so the shielded set incentives. The way this mechanism is designed is that it incentivizes only actual contributions to the privacy set. So we have to create a system that this encourages spam. So it is able to detect, for example, at what point it actually contributes or not contributes to the privacy. So think of, like, for example, the very first transactions addition to the marginal additional privacy to the set are pretty high, but they might be reaching a point where extrapolate through really high values, a point where an additional transaction to it does actually not contribute that much anymore to privacy. So this mechanism needs to be able to adjust to that, so like the real conditions, the volume, etc., and the actual value. And it also has to discourage spam. With the public goods funding mechanisms, this I already mentioned, the fact that we're splitting validators from the governance council and the council that actually decides where to fund. And there's a bunch of things about proactive and retroactive PGF. There is, the best deep dive for this is on the specs. I'll show you the link later. There's a few ideas about which categories of things are funded, can be funded, which ones proactively and retroactively. And a portion of carrots goes to the next security as a proof of stake chain. It goes to validators and delegators. Cool. So here's the roadmap. Namada is launching actually pretty soon. We started the development of this protocol at the beginning of this year. We announced it really not that long ago. We actually operated with a few third-party validators. A testnet is working well. And we're planning to launch at least the incentivized trusted setup and the public testnets before the end of the year. Hopefully, Namada goes live by the end of the year, if not early next year. There are a few other upgrades that we're looking into already, which can be really interesting. So the thing that I am most excited about is the idea of private bridges. The issue can have, 5 minutes, got it, okay. The issue you have with having a layer 1 that has this anonymity set is that actually anonymity sets among layer 1s are competitive. So there's rivalry in there. And a way of removing that is by enabling kind of private IVC or private bridges, so anonymity sets can actually be shared across layer 1s. And that would be a desirable thing to have for us, because otherwise it kind of, there's one pool, but then imagine that something happens to this chain, or a validator starts to kind of censor transactions, something like that. Ideally, you want make it easy for another instance of Namada to appear and be operated by a different set of validators, but then not lose into the anonymity set. It might take some time to transfer to reach the size of the pool. But if you enable private bridges and private IVC, that anonymity is actually shared across all pools. So that's something really cool. Also really fits really well with the idea of privacy as a public good. Other versions, things like Fairview for censorship resistance, as in remove the ability for validators to see the content of the transaction before it actually gets finalized. Further implementations of IVC into other layer 1s, and a few other improvements. So how to get involved? If you're interested in this topic, there are soonish ways to get involved. First of all, is trusted setup, as This is the ceremony that the other protocols have done, Zcash, Aztec. You need this because we're deploying a custom circuit. So if you're planning to use shielded transfers on Namada, I would really recommend you to actually participate in the ceremony, because then at least you can trust yourself that you actually got rid of the toxic waste. And then otherwise, if you're interested in operating validators, then you can also participate in public testnets. There will also be some programs for end users, because we really want to get tested this vertically integrated protocol with also the end user interfaces. And there might be carrots for both of them. Namada is built by Helix. These are my two co-founders, Adrian, who's running around here. He will be giving the talk about Nanoma. Christopher, who lives in Berlin. You might know Christopher the most for being the architect, the designer of the IBC protocol. You might not know Christopher for the Wyvern DEX protocol, which is actually the set of smart contracts that settles every trade on OpenSea. If you go to ETH gas station and you search for the ranking, the rank #1 should still be the Wyvern DEX protocol. Not a lot of people know about this, but it's actually very cool. And Helix is a public goods lab, and if you are interested in joining the team of about 50 people, we are working on many other protocols in many other areas. Check out the jobs page or talk to me later. And that is the end of my talk. There's a few links, namada.net. The code base is open source. The specs are open source. Everything's open source here. Thank you.